everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers, Josh and Dan, I am Dan.
I am Josh.
And on today's podcast, we'll be discussing all things clementicical. That's Latin for crying, because we're going to talk about a tier for Jaspree, the adventure from the Shards Collection Volume 2. So I pulled that one completely out of my backside. If you have any questions for us about anything you're going to hear tonight, anything you've heard before, out of the previous 245 episodes, by all means, drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com, and we will pick Josh's brain for your answers, because nobody wants to hear from me, and that, by the way, is just fine. So, we're okay with that, because, believe me, everybody's here for Josh. I'm here for Josh. Josh is here for Josh. We're in good shape. So, I've never run a tier for Jaspree, but I'm looking forward to this one, because I think it's got some nice elements to it. Any recollection of this one, Josh? Have you seen it before?
I've read it before. I don't recall off the top of my head whether I have run it or not.
Fair.
Obviously, if I did, it did not leave a particularly strong impression in my mind in terms of what was going on.
Fair enough. Well, let's go through all the things and see if anything jars your memory or triggers something for you. This is written for 3 to 5 novice adepts. So basically, quarter dozen people, and between second and fourth circles, second, third, and fourth. So not quite novice, or some not quite beginners.
So part of that is in third edition, in the Red Brick days, they distinguished between initiate, which was first circle,
right,
and novice, which was 2 through 4.
That was the word I was looking for, is initiate.
And that was largely just because of the way that they structured the discipline breakdowns in the player's guide.
Yeah.
They would have like initiate, the first circle stuff, and then once you were out of initiate and you were into novice, that was the remainder. We got rid of that and just collapsed everything into novice for circles 1 through 4.
That's fine. I couldn't remember the word, but I don't have a distinction either way. Both versions of that were fine.
The intention here is that this adventure is not designed for brand new characters.
Yeah, they need a little bit under their belt, one adventure or not. But there's 4 sections to every part, as always: the setting, the themes, the behind the scenes, the troubleshooting. So there's a couple of encounters in here, and this all begins when you meet a tailor named Fitz. He goes by the nickname Hardly. Hardly Fitz is your tailor. I'm just going to leave that out there. I didn't write this one, but there's the pun for you. You're hired for a, air quotes, routine, fetching type errand to accompany his assistant, Savron. My notes make it look like I wrote down Sauron from Lord of the Rings, but that's not quite right. So, different character, just so you know.
Completely.
Yes. It's about 11 days walk. So you should be in Bartertown, because he is one of the master tailors in Bartertown. Although I suppose you could probably move this somewhere else, maybe Travar, if you like. It could be. So anywhere where there's a big city where this guy's located, and then a small town elsewhere that's about 11 days walk to a town called Safeway. For me, that's a grocery store, but for other people, that's the name of the town. To retrieve some espagra hides. This whole adventure centers around espagra, their mating season, and some rare espagra and some commonplace espagra as well. So you're going to be saying the word espagra about 3,000 times through the course of this adventure, because it's centered around them, without doubt. En route, you are attacked by young espagra searching for food, because, again, jump the characters into a little bit of combat first, rolling some dice, like Josh said last time. And if you want to, I believe in this adventure that they're already customized for young espagra. All the stat blocks are a little bit different than they are in 4th edition. I took a look at them. They're a little bit lower numbers, so no need to alter them with any kind of a mask, like size small for the 4th edition. I think they're already set up for that one. One of those things. Initial thoughts on any of that, Josh?
I like how the premise of the adventure revolves around a couple of different things. It sets things up, in a sense, by establishing this fashion trend. Clothing made of espagra hides has recently become a notable fashion trend, and those who are in high society and so forth are hoping to demonstrate their
Status.
ability to keep up with fashion, but their wealth and all sorts of other stuff by having clothes made out of espagra hide.
Yeah.
And that is what is driving part of the plot here. The tailor that hires the group is sending them essentially to escort their assistant who is going to purchase hides. And the reason that the hides are being purchased is because of this fashion trend.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that it does is it fleshes out the ecology of the espagra a little bit more than has ever really been focused on before, in terms of it talking about the life cycle of the espagra and how there's sort of a mating season, and this is what happens during the mating season, and the motivations and attempts by one of the characters that we'll be encountering later revolves around him understanding that ecology and trying to take advantage of it in order to make bank, because everybody's after these espagra hide.
Yeah.
That causes some problems, which again we'll get into. But I do like that there is some attempt to provide a broader context, a broader social context, as well as a broader ecological context to what is going on here.
Yeah.
That isn't, strictly speaking, necessary to the story. It's just simply like, oh, here are the reasons why this stuff is happening, and the player characters get involved in it. You've got some younger espagra who are just recently hatched and coming down, and the premise is that after the mating season, because they're all like really hungry from that, they'll kind of attack or eat anything, and that maybe makes it easier to attract them or distract them or hunt them or whatever. But it also does include a couple of variant espagra, the jungle and the mountain varieties, which we may talk about a little bit later.
We will.
But yeah, that's kind of the setup here. Is the group gets hired to go to a place as kind of a courier quest, an escort quest in a way.
Yeah.
And they encounter some espagra along the way as the initial encounter. Yeah.
I like knowing why of the setting, and I agree with you that this kind of immerses it more into an Earthdawn specific setting. The mating, in case of the mating season of this one specific creature, and therefore the economic use for that creature. So it's a very specific Earthdawn creature and a very specific way of immersing everybody into the story of, this is not your D&D campaign. It's really hard to port this one over for something else unless something can be mirrored in D&D.
Well, the premise of it is pretty easily adaptable.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that is, strictly speaking, Earthdawn unique about this, aside from the fact that the espagra is an iconic Earthdawn creature.
That was my point.
Yeah. But the premise is the fact that there is more depth and decoration around what's going on here.
Yeah.
You could just as easily have a D&D adventure that is, these creatures have this kind of mating pattern, and that's a universal situation, but you don't frequently see that kind of detail.
Agreed.
Both, again, from the social and the ecological standpoint in a lot of pre-written adventures, especially ones that are sort of short-term like this.
Agreed.
I mean, it's detail that is relevant, but not strictly speaking necessary. And I appreciate that.
I do too. Like I said, I loved the entire buildup of the thing and the reasons why all of these things are going to happen in this adventure. Part 2. As you near the town of Safeway and make camp for the night, you're allowed to find, if you guys roll well enough or the game master wants to hand it to you, whoever rolled highest finds it, or whatever the case may be, in case you don't actually meet the target number. You find a shrine to Jaspree just off the beaten path, kind of obscured a little bit, with a living, although near death, espagra laying on it, on this shrine. And this is where you begin to start having some player agency as far as, do you kill it? Do you rescue it? If you have a beast mastering party who wants to make it a pet, that's possible. It is a rare breed of espagra. This is the mountain espagra because it's all white. Normally espagra are like this bluish green sheen. And then right in the midst of that, you are ambushed or attacked by Birgit's brigands, who shot the thing, tracked it here, and want to claim the hide or the thing for their own. So this is again slightly more immersion to the Earthdawn specific setting of the Shrines of Jaspree, more espagra, and this rare color espagra. And this is where you have to have your social interactions a little bit, maybe some combat, maybe some training, maybe some acquiring the beast as a familiar. Don't know. So thoughts on part 2?
No, it's all straightforward. It is setting up the later situations in the adventure.
Yeah.
I like the presence of passions as a focal or plot element of adventures in general. I think the use of Jaspree here somewhat foreshadows the ecological message going along with this adventure. It's not heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And I think the player characters ultimately still have their own agency involved, but I think things are getting set up for the later conflict to decide what they're going to do. In a sense, this encounter is perhaps not intentionally set up as such from an in-setting standpoint, is still going to be viewed by Jaspree as a test of sorts. How are these adepts going to handle this situation where there is an injured creature that is being hunted by name givers, and how do the player characters handle that situation?
Yeah. So, because normally speaking, if this is your first encounter of an espagra, maybe you're unfamiliar, this one's wounded, so it's therefore playing on your good nature. But 9 times out of 10, every other adventure you're going to be in, when an espagra is hunting you, you're not going to have the thing, maybe I should save this. It's going to be, well, it's the monster, I should attack it, I should take care of things. And you go from there. Step 3, you finally arrive at Safeway. This was my favorite part of this adventure so far because there are 9 locations in detail. And so you could lift these locations one at a time to any other adventure you're running, modify them a tweak here and there, and drop them into whatever adventure you're running, homebrew or pre-gen or whatever. There's a Theron outpost, an inn and tavern, a farm, a tanner's apprentice is kind of a person, but also a separate location because he's at home. There's a mason in there. There's a forge in there, a community forge. There's a livery and stable, and there's a training hall. All of those have a paragraph or 2 describing them and the people who run them, the name givers involved in them. And so, like I said, even if you don't run this adventure, you can lift any of those 9 locations and put them somewhere else if you need something to grab real quick. Not a bad idea. They're there. So a crafty game master will use this plethora of settings and descriptions for other things. After asking around when you get to Safeway, you find the tanner is missing. That's the guy you're looking for because he took care of the hides that you're supposed to purchase. But there's a questor of Jaspree who finds you and offers to assist you. And again, this draws focus down to more of the Earthdawn specific setting because there's a questor here, questor of Jaspree, who's looking for espagra because he's a questor of Jaspree, and you're also trying to find the tanner because of the hides. So this is, again, where you rely on all of your social skills to do the things you need to do around this section of the adventure.
Yeah. There's nothing necessarily that immediately indicates to the player characters that the questor and what he's asking about and what he's investigating are directly connected to the missing tanner.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of a thematic thing where they had that encounter at the Shrine of Jaspree, and now you meet a questor of Jaspree. Like, that is a thread that is running through the situations.
Yeah.
The questor does take a little bit of a mystical approach to what's going on because of the presence of the mountain espagra, because it is sort of a rare or an uncommon variant to be seen down in the lowlands.
Yeah.
And takes that as some kind of sign or indication from Jaspree that these individuals are perhaps ones that he should be working with. And he will be a rather useful ally in what's to come, because in addition to being a questor of Jaspree, he is also a Fifth Circle Swordmaster.
Yes.
Which would help add some potentially useful martial prowess in the encounters to come.
Forthcoming, yes. So the last, I can't say the last section, but this is something you can build on. This could be the start of a slightly smaller campaign than a long year-long thing, because eventually, or by some prodding or shoehorning or railroading, your group's going to have to wander around to all these other places looking for this Tanner person, and they finally wander into the woods. The shrine was in the woods, so maybe they get the idea that, okay, well, maybe this is where this guy is, in search of the Tanner. And you come across more of the brigands that are subduing an espagra in whatever means they deem necessary, and it's not always going to be pleasant. And the Tanner happens to be nearby, and he's shackled up. So he's not exactly enslaved, but he's a captive. And so here's how the second, third, or fourth circle characters are going to handle this. Are they going to negotiate? Are they going to confront? Are they going to combat the brigands? How are they going to handle this situation? So this is the big if-then statement. What do they do? What is their temperament? And the game master is going to have to plan for any of those outcomes, just so you know, because you have to rescue the Tanner either way. Or do you want to come back later and be sneaky about it? Get him in the middle of the night. Who knows? Because your ultimate responsibility is to return to Hardly Fits in Bartertown with the Tanner and the purchased hides that the Tanner happens to have. So, thoughts on that? Because I think this is the nice culmination of social abilities and or combat and, the big if-then statement.
Yes and no. There's sort of two parts of it. There's the initial encounter with another group of the brigands that are dealing with espagra and trying to capture espagra and so forth. And that can be more of a role-playing negotiation situation. Mm-hmm. The leader of this little group, who's the brother of Burgot, who's the head of this group of brigand hunters.
Yes.
He's not super interested in what's going on. He's kind of helping his brother out, but he's not fully on board with it. So he is willing to work with the player characters, especially if they are being overpowered and it's clear that they're in over their heads. And it is at this point that the player characters discover not just the missing Tanner, but why he's missing. And that is that Burgot, the head of this brigand group, kidnapped the Tanner because he's trying to make a killing on espagra hides and needs somebody to gather the hides and deal with them.
Yes. Skin them properly.
But is going about it in a pretty bad way. There are a number of espagra at the camp that are themselves captive in cages. It's fairly clear that the treatment of them is a little bit cruel, is a little bit excessive. Mm-hmm. Jaspree does have a recognition of the cycles of life and predator and prey and things like that, because that's all part of nature. But this is a case where name givers are going kind of outside of that balance.
Yeah.
The questor that's along with the group will kind of take this as a sign, as an opportunity to right that. But it does also indicate that there really isn't any way of talking down Burgot. There is going to be a conflict here ultimately. Yeah. And while he does have a bunch of people at his camp, they're not hardened criminals and will tend to retreat if you hit them badly. And then there's a bunch of espagra that, if they can be set free, will also, along with the presence of the questor, will kind of as well come into. So you can have kind of a big, messy fight situation here at the end.
Yes.
Ultimately the goal being to rescue the missing Tanner, but at the same time as well to right the wrong, to act intentionally or no on behalf of Jaspree in terms of righting this wrong and putting a stop to Burgut. This final encounter at the camp basically says there's no reasoning with this guy. There's going to be a fight.
Yeah.
Even if there is an attempt to. I don't feel like there is quite as much flexibility in terms of the approach to this adventure as we have in some of the other ones that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of maybe a couple of different approaches when you're dealing with the brother in the scene before it. But for the most part, it's okay, now we've tracked this down. Now we've got to break up this bandit camp and put a stop to this guy who's being greedy and is abusing people and animals and whatnot.
Yeah, he's a zealot. He's a little inhumane about certain things. So I like this adventure has some investigation, some negotiation, possibly. Yes, trigger warning, themes of imprisonment, indoor kidnapping, animal rescue, maybe some dueling going on. There's a questor involved, small town secrets, and most of these people in the small town, spoiler alert, are former Theron slaves. So there's a lot going on in this milieu. There's a lot of themes and images that can be drawn upon or expanded upon by the game master. So I think that this is not a bad third adventure for whatever party you're running.
This is a fairly solid adventure. There aren't any glaring issues that I notice with it.
Yeah.
There's certainly space for things to be fleshed out, particularly in the community itself. Yes, it does provide information about a number of different locations and the people that are in them, but there's not a lot of that ties heavily into the actual story of the adventure itself. They can talk to some people there and, get a little bit of information.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's solid. It is a good low circle adventure. Mm-hmm. With some very solid themes and through lines running through it, and some additional detail that is nice to see in what is a shard, a capsule adventure, something that is likely to be taken care of in a session or two.
Yeah. And it's not your typical legendary deed or go find this magic item or go explore this care. There are just everyday jobs that adventurers have to do. And this is the one that's going to take up a couple of weeks' time. So accompany my associate, go get these items, bring them back safely. I will pay you.
Yeah.
Not exactly a Shadowrun snatch and grab, but this is a long-term, go get this, bring it back, ferry this thing to me because I'm paying you to do so. Ta-da! That's how these things work. So go guard my shipment of stuff. That's it. And you can make a dozen of these adventures, all slightly different, but this is the one we have to talk about today. I think a tier for Jaspree, nicely done. The writing is good. It's very complete, nice and thorough. And there's even a magic item at the end that probably is not going to end up in your hands because it belongs to the Tanner.
I was actually about to mention that there is a magical dagger that is provided at the end, but it belongs to the Tanner.
Yeah.
It's unlikely that circumstances would arise to allow the group to get a hold of it, unless something happens to him, which is kind of a negative outcome when it comes to the overall adventure.
A little bit.
It's not indicated that's like, oh, he's going to provide this as a bonus. It's an interesting little item. It's got a couple of neat little abilities, in addition to just having increased damage.
Yeah.
As is typical of a melee weapon. It actually provides bonuses to tests involving skinning or tanning animal hides, which is an interesting sort of secondary effect. And then it's got this kind of weird off-the-wall top rank effect. at rank 5, once you've performed the deed, the wielder can use the hide of an animal that has been skinned with the dagger to take the form of the animal.
Nicely done.
It's a cool ability and is somewhat typical, I think, of the original magic items that show up in 3rd edition stuff, where it's got like fairly mundane progression of the first few ranks, and then it hits this higher or top rank, and it has this power that seems
odd.
A little bit weird.
Yeah, where'd this one come from?
Because this is an item that is not likely to actually get into players' hands, I'm not sure what the point of it even being in here is.
I just like the fact that not every magical item is a spellcasting thing or a weapon. So I think
I appreciate its originality in some regards, but I wonder, because it is a thread item that belongs to the person that they are trying to rescue, and it's clear that it is not going to be something that he is going to provide to them as a reward.
Yeah.
He might get involved in the fight if they're able to set him free or something. But yeah, it feels weird.
I agree. I mean, I'm glad it's there as a MacGuffin. Is why the Tanner is so good at his job, because he has this magical item, but it's not going to end up in the character's possession unless something seriously goes wrong and anybody wants to start this as a side gig. But okay.
You could always be in the situation where you as the game master could go, I don't really want to do anything with this adventure, but I like this item. So there is some potential use there. It's just another of those things that makes me, from a writing/design standpoint, to go, what is the purpose of having this in here if it's not going to be something that the player characters really interact with at all? Mm-hmm. That seems to me to be a little bit nitpicky in some regards.
That's all right.
But
otherwise, it's fleshing out the setting. If they don't ever end up with it, great. That's one more magical item that goes, this is the kind of things you can find in Earthdawn.
Yeah.
You can go with that. So I like this one. I think I can incorporate some parts of this, if not this entirely. And really, if you're even running it for higher circle adventures, you can just up the stakes a little bit with the bad guys you're throwing at them. So
maybe
there's a way to flex it out. But otherwise, any final thoughts on this one?
No, it's solid. This doesn't have some of the issues that I've had with some of the other adventures that we've talked about out of this collection. It's pretty solid, pretty straightforward. It doesn't feel like it's got a lot of extra unnecessary stuff attached to it. I like the through line. I like the thematic consistency. I like its straightforward nature. Mm-hmm. It's a solid adventure. I certainly don't have anything to not recommend.
No, run it second or third, not first for your initiate/first circle characters, but otherwise get to this one eventually, or at least earlier in your, if you're going to string some pre-gen adventures together, get to this one second or third. You'll have fun with it. So until next time, folks, by all means, go hunt some espagra for your legend.
Good night, everybody.